Dan Swede with Hydrochem Systems, here with Melinda and Chuck from Cleanse My Bins from Florida. Pretty much training part one, we're going to go over the pressure cleaning system itself. I'll try to keep the camera open. Typically, right from the get-go, you end up with a big block Vanguard engine at 31 horse, twin cylinder gas powered, so you have spark plugs that normally need maintenance maybe once every year or so. Depends on operations and all that. Typically, so you got spark plugs, you got an inline fuel filter, pretty common when it comes to inline fuel filter. You do have a diesel fuel filter back here. That's for your burner. And it's also an oil water, like a diesel fuel water separator on there too, so you do have a drain on the bottom here. You only normally need to replace that cartridge itself. That should be in there. Typically it is a belt-driven industrial pump, so you have triple belts on here to drive the pump itself. You do have a belt that drives the generator. There's a 2900 watt onboard brushless, real heavy duty generator on here. And that's driving the electrical voltage for the burner. This is actually a 115 volt burner system. And our hydroclear transfer pump and the recycling system all runs off the generator. If you ever have an issue where the vacuum's not kicking on, you want to check your burner. If the heat's kicking on, you know you got voltage going into the, from the generator into the system. It could be a matter of a little breaker here or a breaker on the system. There's some other issue that if you forgot to turn your transfer pump on and the tank is full, like a wet vac filling up too high, it has a float in there that will shut the vacuum off to prevent you keep sucking water without you transferring the water out. So there's a few different things that we'll talk you through when and if anything does happen. We are a more advanced troubleshooting technical guide that's going to have that information there also, but we'll get into that kind of detail. Your frame's all stainless steel. Don't put chlorine or anything else on there. Keep it with stainless steel polish. Keep it clean. It'll last forever if you did that. What's kind of unique about the pump and pump rails for adjusting the belt is we got the through bolts right here. They go through the frame assembly, which is more like a box frame. Normally when you put a pump on there, the old days, or just most of them, the pump can slip around a lot. You have a hard time trying to line your belts up when you change your belts and tighten the belt. By us kind of almost cradling like a saddle on a horse, it doesn't allow it to shift. So it's very, very easy to change and maintain your belts or tighten your belt. You just loosen the two bolts, and there's a guide bolt here that allows the pump to go in and out. So you're able to make really quick, fast. This used to take like 2 hours. Now it's a matter of minutes to be able to get you up and running. Also, obviously, the benefit is there if you're at a service center getting repair work, it isn't like they're going to charge you a couple extra hours because they got a, what do you call it, take half the machine apart in order to do that, so that's real convenient. It's another key feature. We have captain nuts on these, so everything, when you pull the belt guard off, you just unscrew from the top. You used to have to be up and under, cut yourself, or not necessarily that, but sometimes you didn't have to lift the machine off the deck just to get to the bolts on the bottom. Everything is just re-engineered to be the best of the best when it comes to serviceability and all that. We have, it has its own charging system, so this is has a 12 volt battery. We run a deep cycle 1000 co-cranking amp battery in here to start the engine. What's nice is because we don't run a 12 volt economy burner, we're not relying on that 12 volt battery and charging system to kind of run the heater. The economy stuff, there's cheaper systems, but they run off a 12 volt battery, no transfer pump, no recycling system. They just want to create heat the cheapest way they can. One of the negative parts, if they can burn through 5.5 gallons of diesel an hour, which could cost you $10 an hour more than this. This system normally will burn roughly 1.5 gallons of diesel fuel an hour, sometimes less, when you're doing car cleaning. You're not running all day.
Is that the diesel tank?
The diesel tank is here. The white tank is the diesel. 18-gallon diesel tank, 18-gallon gas tank. A lot of times they're oversized because if they're burning through 4.5, 5.5 gallons of diesel, you're going through this, you know, once or twice a day. Now with our high efficiency burner, which costs like $900 more for us to put it together for you guys, is double insulated coil. So we have ceramic insulation flame blanket around the heating coil where the flame chamber is. The coil's 70 foot longer than a conventional heating coil. It's the pipe that's inside the flame chamber that the water runs through. And the heater and burner, and plus we have a high efficiency burner. This lowers our margin but increases your operating, you know, reduces your cost of operation enough to actually probably buy a second trailer and finance that just in the fuel savings alone on a 40-hour week. So it's huge, big factor. Basically, let me see here. It is electric start engine, so you don't want to deadhead the pump. If you're trying to turn a pump that's pushing out 3,500 at 9 gallon a minute and typically what's almost a 3,000 watt generator, it's hard on the starter. So you always want to release the pressure one way or another. You got 2 high pressure reels with guns, so you can hold the gun open and release the pressure that way. And that bypass valve I showed you on the side of the control valve, that's your main way. What's nice about that, you don't have to run the gun and spray water all over the area while it's starting to heat the water. You can just kick it on and run that, and you can actually use that as your starter to protect your I have guys that'll come in and click, my battery's dead. Starts the engine right up. And if we would have kept on it, you would just blew the starter out. You know what I mean? So if you have it where you feel like maybe it is a dead, like a starter issue or something isn't right, release the pressure. Remember I opened a little valve and it went, you know. On a system like this, has much high pressure lines and fittings and all, if I shut this off and the gauge read 3,500 PSI today, you should be able to come back tomorrow morning and that pressure still read 3,500 PSI. If it doesn't, look for a drip or leak. You want to always keep everything tight and sealed. No leaks on the suction side, no leaks anywhere. You always want to keep this buttoned up nice and tight. Look at this side here. The other thing is, so you got the starter, you do have a choke. In Florida and other areas, when this starts really easy. I tend to, when I start the engine, it'll be loud, so it's better to explain now. I normally leave the choke off. I'll crank the engine and I'll pump the choke in and out just until it starts. But always give it a shot when it comes, especially in the summer or down in Florida. If you have the choke on right away, you can actually follow your spark plug with fuel. So it's always easier, and it could be just instantaneous, just crank and boom, boom, and it will fire right up. So go light on the choke as needed. If it's really, really cold, you might have to apply it more. Shouldn't have too many days like that down by you. It is an air-cooled engine, so you want to keep the airflow open on here. So if you put a chemical tank on here or some other thing in the future or anything, you want to make sure that you have proper airflow. This runs at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So unlike a car that's, 200, 220 under pressure, where it can go hotter than boiling point, everything's about air. Florida, hot climate, so the air will actually flow through the inlet fan here, cools the cylinder heads down and blows out the back of the engine. That's why we have all these heat shields in place. You want to maintain, make sure they're in good shape. You got a heat shield around the muffler assembly too. So with all this being here and done, it'll protect the fuel tanks and anything else from getting hot when it comes to that. Your oil is normally a 30 weight hydraulic oil or general pump oil. You have two ways to check it. You have a dipstick on top. Normally if you don't have access to the sight glass, then you would use a dipstick. But normally you have a red dot here, so when it's even with a red dot, you know your oil level is good on level ground. You can fill it from the dipstick here. You also have a convenient valve here, allows you to drain your pump and engine oil out, and it pulls it away instead of dripping under the trailer or trying to catch it. You have the ability to actually put it into a little paint pan or Tupperware or something. It holds about 44 ounces of oil on there. They're also approving like synthetic oil on the pumps and all. But basically everything will be in your operating manual and everything. Same with the engine. The engine only has 2 quarts of oil in it. It runs at like 350 Fahrenheit. I do recommend like a Mobil 1 or a good quality synthetic engine oil. You have the dipstick here. Basically, you just want to make sure it's up to the full mark on that. If it's down, you got 2 quarts. You know you're running a risk. What I do is I tend to recommend about a 50-hour oil change. Your trip was 20 hours to get here. Imagine that trip, taking your truck going all the way up here, going back to like Georgia, and not thinking of changing your oil with that many miles on there. So by you doing a schedule with an hour meter on here of 50-hour oil changes, manufacturer says you can go 100. What's nice about that, if you hit 50 hours on Wednesday and you're blasting work till Saturday or Sunday before you can get an oil change, that's going to give you the extra buffer time. When we get these engines averaging 43 to 4,500 hours, that's twice the life of normally a twin Honda pressure washer engine. That's equal to about 285,000 highway miles. If you're doing 70 miles an hour and you put 4,350 hours on there, you know, so to get that kind of respect and quality out of an engine that may cost you $2,500 to swap out when you do finally wear it out, you almost want to have a celebration that you wore it out if you get that many hours, because you're making money then. So just keep it there. You do have an air filter on top. Traditionally, if you're not on construction sites and doing concrete cut weird stuff, you'll normally roughly once every 6 months to a year on that. You want to check it. If you had any issues with a carburetor or other that might spit a little fuel in there, you might need to change them. So what I do is I actually prefer that you find a local Vanguard engine warranty facility. Buy your air filter, buy your spark plugs, buy your fuel filter and your oil filter from them. Put your company name in their system, so if something did fail under warranty, you're not, oh, have you ever been here before? Oh no, you know. You want to be the customer. You want to be there. You want to be able to say, hey, oh, your starter's bad. Let me see if I can get you in and out real quick and get it there and back. You don't want to be, so start a good relationship. You can go on to vanguardengine.com and they'll tell you which is the diamond or preferred warranty facility. You can always go service, but service may not be warranty. So find that. It'll keep you up and running. Box of donuts every now and then or whatever. Just keep them happy. So when you do it, as rare as it may be, you want that relationship. And that's why we're not getting greedy and have to sell you this and this and this. We'd rather you form the proper, relationships locally. Like I said, your drain hose is here. Your oil filter is in between the generator and there, but it's easy access. Not like most vehicles when you try to change your own oil, it's ridiculous. So easy to service and manage and maintain this. You do get a 3-year warranty on this. All your warranty docs and paper come with you in the manual, and you actually have another manual coming on all the equipment. Typically, you do have a pressure gauge. Now, with the gauge up on the panel here, it's reading the head pressure on the pump. That's before the pressure regulating device. So when you shut the gun off, that'll go to 0. When you have the gun open, it'll read your running pressure. If you don't, we can get you a test gauge that's on disconnect, so you can add to your reel or somewhere down the line for more diagnostic. But you can always use the back gauge, which does read your running pressure and what we call bypass pressure. Whenever you shut the gun off, say you're running at 3,500 PSI, when you shut the gun off, it'll spike up to like 4,300 PSI, normally about max, but that's your shut-off pressure. Then when you pull the trigger, it'll drop down. So if all of a sudden you got a tip that you've been using for 6 months and you're pulling the trigger and you're like, damn, I'm only getting 2,200 PSI with this, that, the first thing I'll tell you is swap tips. Make sure it's just not a worn out spray nozzle. Spray nozzles last about 200 hours, give or take. And it's kind of amazing to think hardened stainless steel, that water can erode that out in 200 hours. And that's why everything we build on this, whether it comes to the high pressure side or Schedule 80 coil, heating coil, 1/2 inch unloader valve, everything's reinforced because there is that erosion or that wear factor from water itself breaking things down. So everything's really super industrial on there, and you shouldn't have too many issues, but there is some standard wear when it comes to anything.
Some spade nozzles a box display on it.
Yep, and having a spare kit on there too. What we have here, obviously here's your battery box with your battery. You do have a breaker in there too, so there's a breaker for the pump. Your generator's here, this single belt on that, so you have a similar, little different way of getting to the belt on this when it comes to that, but it's still relatively easy to change and maintain the belt on the generator. You have two plugs here. These are 115 volt plugs. One of the ways that you can diagnose something if something does come up is if you have an extension cord at your shop or garage, you can always run an extension cord to here, plug in the vacuum recycling unit, plug in the transfer pump and test it. So you have a way to double check if it's the generator or breaker here, or it could be even maybe a defective ground fault circuit interrupter plug, which is like a normal plug you have in your kitchen. And there's reset buttons here. There's two reset buttons.
Does that have an inverter on it?
Huh?
Inverter?
No,
how did it come out with the home?
It actually has a generator motor. This is
Okay.
actually a 2,900 watt generator, like you would have a gas powered generator. It has its own 115 volt generator.
okay.
Doesn't need an inverter, so we're not. Another thing with an inverter, it just robs so much power from the 12 volt.
Yeah.
If you're running a burner, a chemical pump, transfer pump, and an inverter, you're just going to burn up your burner system. So we have two plugs here. Normally if it is an issue with one or the other, and you did need to you reset the breaker on here, just unplug both, hit the reset. A red light will come on behind the panel if the breaker popped. So you'll be able to know that. Otherwise, you can just, like I said, it's a secondary way. The other thing you have more than one system. You have the burner that's off the generator, the vacuum, and the transfer. So you have more than if this was just commercial pressure washer with other things, I tell people to take an electric drill or something or a light, plug it in and see if you got power coming off. But with there's so many redundant things operating off the generator that it's easy enough to isolate if there is an issue with one item or another. Your control panel is all NEMA sealed waterproof panel. You have your hour meter here, good for your oil change maintenance, even job sites. If you want to clock in, tell them that it's done within a tenth of an hour, so you can basically set out what's on the hour meter. 328.2, fine, they're done with the job. They just did 300 cans, X amount of time. It's a nice way to do some cost accounting and keep track. Also, if you're not sure if these guys are getting extra income by knocking out an extra driveway, house, or whatever, I mean, it's good to have an incentive program where if they do it, they get a percentage of that extra sale or extra house they clean, you know what I mean? But it is good to have the hour meter tracked and time on there. You have your adjustable thermostat here and your on-off for your burner. So your burner will kick on. It's on demand because you remember the steam explosion I showed you in the book? If this thing was just allowed to, if I started the engine and the heater would just running, but none of the water was actually going through the coil, it was just trapped in there, that built up pressure can hit, that explosion I showed you on that little electric pressure washer, it hit 14,000 PSI before the machine blew apart. So that, and it was a 1,000-pound electric pressure washer that was 115 volt. Had nothing to do with pump pressure, 100% doing with like a pressure chamber. So on here, the thermostat acts as a safety device. It's a high limit switch. So by having this, it's gonna just run and operate at the temperature you run at. Normally like 180, 200 is about the optimal temperature for this industry. So it's gonna control that. If it goes above and beyond, it's designed to shut off that fuel solenoid on the burner. So it's gonna cut off the diesel fuel supply going to the burner, so it's gonna cut off the flame. And so this is it's technically a redundant safety device. It's featured because it is adjustable, so you can control your temperature on that. The other devices are back over here. Which are really important. Can you run up to the step and come back down? It should kick the light on out here. There we go, good enough. Okay, so These get into we call the weeds every now and then, but it's good to know and identify where they're at. This assembly here has, this right here, the pressure switch, that's in your manual too. It's identified this exact switch. So you have a pressure switch. So when the machine's on, if it's not under pressure, the burner will not kick on. So you need now, you're limited on the temperature with the adjustability of the burner. It has to be under pressure for it to not just start to superheat. This is a flow switch here on the unit. It senses water flowing into the heater and coil and that it's continually flowing. If for some reason we shut the flow off, the burner is going to cut off. We don't want trapped water being superheated. So some people use one switch to save money. There's thermostat, pressure switch, flow switch. We also have a steam burst relief valve. Remember the barb I was showing you on there? So here is probably the most important switch, safety device on the trailer here. And let me zoom in real quick for you. This barb looking fitting, it's got a burst this, it'll burst at 8,000 PSI steam pressure. So if this pops off, and it's happened where you'll run, you'll operate, all of a sudden poof, like I said, if you're driving slowly through a community, doing driveways or sidewalks and going down or curbs, and you get a little low on water, you move forward, it sucks some air in there or some other, could be a little thing. If that pops off, it's good to have a second one. Install the new one in, fill the tank up, make sure you're back operating. It could be good for the next year, no problem or better. If it pops again, shut down and take it to a shop. Way too dangerous if this pops off, because you're hitting 8,000 PSI, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I've had them every now and then, poof, and we think it's a mystery or it's probably low on water, or whatever that means may have happened, and not happen again for a year and a half. So the other thing we have on here on the pump is a pressure relief system, a pop-off, I mean. So this device right here is called an unloader valve or bypass valve. What happens is the pump is a positive displacement pump. When the engine's running, the pump is pumping. It isn't variable at all. It's all or nothing, okay? So when water's coming through the system, say that we start the machine, release the pressure, now we shut the gun off. What happens, the spring is activated, and there's a valve, a port on the back of the unloader here, while the water is going to flow back to your tank. And so this is what we call a cold bypass. It's actually, you could actually start the machine, say you got a house, you're cleaning the carts at here, and now there's another house 10 houses away. You could actually leave the pressure washer running. The cool bypass will be activated and circulating the water back to the tank. You're not doing any damage. Get to the next clock, start cleaning. Now, if you're going across town and going to be running for 5, 10, 15 minutes, shut the machine off. But for the intermittent use, this cool bypass cycle is real beneficial to protect the pump. What happens if you took a portable pressure washer like Chuck has and you hook it to a garden hose and you decide to walk away and use the phone for 20 minutes, come back, your pump's probably going to be burnt up. It's called heat to bypass. So anything under pressure with this unloader, especially if it's going back to the pump only, well, I mean, pumps can get up to 200 degrees in 4 minutes, and it will melt all the check valve and other things in the pump and go beyond that. So it's nice having this cool bypass in here. Let me see here. This is your gasoline tank. It's black now to be carbon emission. So there's a carbon emission from California across the country, the whole system. What it has is the black fuel tank here. It's 18 gallons, so high capacity. Actually, I had to get special carb permission. Most are 8 gallons because anything over 8, you end up with a different category. So what's incorporated on the system to be compliant, we're in the weeds again, but it's fine. At least you got it all covered. These are carbon filters that are going to filter out the fumes from it. It's a sealed tank now, so these are actually ratchet tanks to prevent any gasoline from getting into the environment. And these carbon filters are filtering out the hydrocarbons or the fumes. and recirculating them. So bottom line, these, we had to put 2 of them on in order to be able to be compliant for carbon emissions. So you already have that. Everything is certified for Florida, California, whatever you need. It's all redundant, it's all part. Now, one other thing, just to point it out, more for Kevin. This line here, this wire, right here, that goes to your thermostat. Your thermostat has a probe that goes in here that's actually sensing the temperature, and that's where the probe is. So if something ever happened with the thermostat or whatever, if it ever needed to be replaced, they actually replaced from the probe that wire into the thermostat knob, and that's where, with the spare parts kit, we actually give you the exact one, that way you have the right prongs and plug in. And even if you go to a shop for repair, they don't have the original exact one. Just say, order me the right one. Not trying to rob you from a part, but use the OEM stuff, because you want to make sure everything goes back in the way it came out. So we give you that too. The other part, it's a little complicated. You're not going to have much of an issue. We run a winterizing tank, so on those very rare, once every couple of years where it gets below 32, if it ever does, you would fill this up with 30 below zero windshield washer fluid as your winterizing agent. It's plumbed into the tank, so this hose is going to the pump here. This 3-way valve allows you to direct the water from, anytime you see this filter here, it means it's going to the supply tank. So right now, you're probably gonna leave it alone permanently, I would assume. But the water coming in here actually will go through here, because this is the way the lever is pointing to the source, and it's going to there. If for some reason one of the big companies says, hey, I got 10,000 carts for you to clean up here in Ohio, you want to drive up and knock out 10,000 carts, because we just lost a contract for what county, or whatever. But if it was the same thing, just say, hey, sure, let me fill up my winterizing tank, I'll be up there, good to go. Now you can work in environments that may take you under these big contracts that do pop up, okay? So all you would have to do is throw the switch here, and the water, it's kind of a weird positioning, but basically it's coming in there. I'm not sure why that's not pointing here, but it's one or the other. So basically this is the port for here, so it's actually a U-shaped port in there. We had a different valve, that's why it kind of threw me for a second here on this. Now, one of the other factors, make sure we get good flow. So if anybody just kind of screwed around with it and you're not getting water, quick look, just double check that. Not even a bad idea to leave some water in here every now and then, just to make sure you're good. Now on the other one, and this happened not that long ago, one of my clients in Texas, this is your water filter from the supply tank before the pressure washer pump. It's an 80 mesh screen filter, high capacity, 1 inch, inch and a half actually, the larger filter on that. It unscrews, so you just basically unscrew this, there's a mesh in there you can wash and clean. Florida is kind of known for sandy water. If you were to tap into a hydrant, fire hydrant, you might get rust and very, very, very fine sand. I mean, almost like translucent sand. This can help trap that, so basically, I had a guy that for some reason there was a plastic bag got into the tank and system, and he called me up and he goes, Dan, I goes, Sunday morning I think, whatever it was, and he goes, Dan, I go, something weird. I mean, my pressure gauge reads like 3,500 PSI. When it's off, the minute I pull the trigger on the gun, it drops to 1,000. When I run my cleaning head, same thing. So it's not just a nozzle. We double check, because you got 2 guns and 2 heads. You've got plenty of ways to test your pressure. I go, unscrew your black filter and double check if there's any kind of debris. I mean, it's like a relatively new unit, He unscrewed it and he called me back and goes, wow, there's a plastic bag in there. I'm like, weird. I don't know how it got in there, you know what I mean? But basically, what happened, it restricted the flow, so when he pulled the trigger, because it's 9 gallons a minute, it wasn't being able to draw that much, and it dropped its pressure. And it was just kind of a weird fluke. I don't know how I hit that on the head on the first try, and especially at that time Sunday morning, you know what I mean? But it's good because I got 30 years in this, and I'm tech support for all that time, so I'm always the one that gets the weird stuff. So bottom line, one of the things you do want to maintain and manage, this recycle will have the capability of recycling your wastewater back to your supply tank, which is where you really want to manage and maintain. So if you do use recycled water, your maintenance is going to go up a little bit. But these are washable filters here. There's some other avenues that you just got to be a little cautious and aware of when it comes to the luxury of having the ability to extend your day and have that on there. Normally if the tank is full and you unscrew this, there's no ring in here, it's near impossible to put it back in until your tank is completely drained. So it's a nice way to also flush out the lines, flush out the little sediment in there. And you do want to get up and in there and vacuum out the water tanks when you're done. Your supply and recovery tank, your hopper, you keep it clean in general. Even, I had a guy once I was in Boca Raton, Florida, up in Lock in a community right behind ours. It was a country club, and they wanted him to start right away. Palm Beach County, they'll give you a hydrant meter, water meter, but they want to lock it to a hydrant, and it takes like 3 days. Well, they told him they had to start on Monday, so I told him, just drive by my house and get water from my house, you know, if you need. At least when break ground and get started. He filled it up, and I looked inside the tank. It had a little bit of scale in there, and I'm like, wow, that's my drinking water. That actually had a little bit of debris in the bottom of this perfect brand new water tank. I was kind of stunned by even how tap water can have some sediment in there and debris. So it's something you want to manage, maintain. Don't be hesitant to vacuum it out. That's why I kind of showed you that industrial wet vac dual roll system. You can use a Sears wet vac or whatever you want to, but it is a part of the process. It's got to be that. We do use a real heavy duty hose that's normally non-collapsible, non-kinkable. So if it had a high bend radius, it won't kink and you can walk on it. The other stuff we used was good, but if you put too much weight, it would flatten out and collapse. Kind of, once again, not the cheapest hose in the world is vacuum pressure hose, but it's real industrial grade. It should last a lifetime on this. Same with the pressure treated deck. I like a wood deck. I always found with steel decks or other metal type decks, it's very rigid. And with a pressure washer, you got a 2-cylinder engine and a triplex plunger pump, which is like 3-cylinder. It has a little bit of vibration. If you're on only a steel deck or platform, you know, mufflers were breaking off. We were finding on the cheaper power washer that they would crack and fracture. So I'm actually more pro wood deck that is the new pressure treated, like near lifetime warranty, whatever it is, type material, because it allows for a little vibration absorption and all on that, and you should never need any kind of replacement on it. So I'm pretty heavy on that. All right, that kind of covered the pressure washer port. Do you have any quick question on the pump, on the part? Let me show you on the burner over here too, so one more little bit. I'm going to turn this part off and make this section 1, and then we'll do 2, 3, 4, whatever it takes. This is the boring part, by the way. But,